Hi, I'm Ava Brooks, and I'm 28 years old. I serve as a combat medic in the United States Army. The moment I got the call about a ceremony at the White House, my hands trembled. For years, my family treated my military career like a temporary phase, a disappointment at best, a joke at worst. They rolled their eyes at my uniform, ignored every medal I brought home, and dismissed my service as some kind of rebellion against their perfect world. What they didn't know was that a mission I couldn't even talk about had changed everything. And now, the truth was going to come from the President of the United States himself. I grew up in Salem, Virginia, in a picture-perfect colonial-style house with spotless windows and well-trimmed hedges. It was a place where success was defined by academic degrees, research publications, and Ivy League diplomas. My father, Dr. Neil Brooks, was the highly respected dean of economics at a top university. My mother, Dr. Karen Brooks, had built a name for herself as a biochemistry researcher. My older brother Zane had followed perfectly in their footsteps, valedictorian, Ivy League graduate, and now a high-earning lawyer at a prestigious firm. The Brooks family had a legacy to protect, and every member was expected to perform their assigned role with precision. Everyone did. Everyone but me. From the moment I could read, my parents decided I would be a doctor. Not just any doctor, a high-ranking one with published papers and speaking invitations. They enrolled me in science camps, hired private tutors, and carefully curated my friendships. My room wasn't decorated with posters of movie stars or pop bands. Instead, I had framed diagrams of the human nervous system, DNA models, and laminated periodic tables. I was being engineered for greatness. But my heart was elsewhere. It happened when I was 9. My grandfather, my dad's father, had served as a combat medic in World War II. While my parents rarely acknowledged his military service and only talked about his later career as a hospital administrator, he and I had quiet moments together where he opened up. He once showed me his medic badge, a tarnished metal piece that looked ordinary to most but felt sacred to me. I wasn't saving the world from a lab, Ava, he said one afternoon, his voice distant. I was saving one soldier at a time, in the dirt, in the dark, under fire. That stuck with me far more than anything I learned at a science fair. Through high school, I did okay academically, not bad but not top of the class either. I floated around A/B+ average and channeled my energy into athletics instead. I thrived in swimming and track, where results depended on physical effort, not legacy or last names. My guidance counselor thought I could aim for good colleges, not Harvard or Yale, but solid pre-med programs. My parents, on the other hand, were visibly disappointed. Zane had perfect SAT scores. My mom reminded me often, he didn't have to settle. When the rejection letters rolled in, I was crushed but not surprised. My father reviewed the 3 acceptance letters I got like a jury reviewing a failed case. "We'll make it work," he said finally, each word soaked in quiet judgment. "State school for undergrad, then maybe you can transfer somewhere more suitable." It felt like I was already branded a failure. Everything changed the day a military recruiter visited our school. While most students bypassed the Army table, I stopped in my tracks. The recruiter, a confident and composed woman named Sergeant Maya Lane, spoke with calm authority. She talked about service, about being part of something bigger, and most importantly for me, about combat medicine. For the first time in my life, I felt a pull not toward what was expected, but toward what felt right. At 19, after one grueling, uninspiring semester at the state university, I made a decision that would fracture my relationship with my family. I enlisted in the United States Army with a combat medic track. I told my family over dinner. My father nearly choked on his drink. "The military," he repeated, stunned. "That's where people go when they run out of real options. Is that how you see yourself?" My mother couldn't even speak. She just shook her head, hands covering her face. But it was Zane who struck the deepest blow. He laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, Ava," he said with a smirk. "You think they're going to let you charge into battle like some movie hero? They'll probably have you organizing band-aids in a back office." I tried to explain. "I want to be a combat medic, like Grandpa." My father's eyes narrowed. "Your grandfather became respectable after the war. He didn't waste his life playing soldier. That night, I sat on my childhood bed staring at the two papers on my desk. One was my acceptance letter to a school I didn't care about, the other, my official enlistment contract. By dawn, my decision was made. 2 weeks later, I boarded a bus to basic training. I carried no support from my family, only their disappointment and mockery trailing behind me like shadows. Basic training tore me down and rebuilt me. The physical challenges were immense, but the mental pressure was even harder. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being measured by test scores or bloodlines. My worth was determined by how far I could run, how long I could endure, and how well I could support my team. My drill sergeants didn't care about my GPA. They cared about whether I could carry a 200-pound man out of a firefight. I surprised even myself. I wasn't just good. I was among the best. After graduating near the top of my class, I advanced to specialized training for combat medics. There, I discovered a calling deeper than anything my parents ever imagined for me. I learned to start IVs in blackout conditions, to treat trauma while under simulated gunfire, to make life-or-death decisions in seconds. One of my instructors once pulled me aside. "Brooks, you've got the hands for this," she said. "But more importantly, you've got the heart." I returned home for Christmas that year, dressed in uniform, ribbons neatly displayed. I thought maybe, just maybe, things would be different, that they might see me with fresh eyes. I was wrong. "When are you going to be done playing dress-up?" my mother asked while I helped her prepare dinner. "The uniform's cute," Zane added. "But let's be honest, you're probably just handing out Tylenol in some army clinic." They asked no questions about my training. They showed no interest in what I had achieved. My father changed the subject whenever I spoke about the army. By the time I returned to base, I finally accepted it. My family would never see value in the path I'd chosen. If I wanted validation, I'd have to find it somewhere else. My combat medic training was nothing like I'd imagined. It was harder, deeper, and more consuming than anything I had ever done. We were taught to administer IVs in full chemical suits, perform tourniquet applications blindfolded, and assess injuries while gunfire echoed in simulated combat zones. Every drill ended with a reminder that the battlefield didn't offer second chances. If your training wasn't perfect, people died. That truth hit harder than any textbook lesson ever had. Surprisingly, I excelled. My instructors noted how steady my hands were during high-stress scenarios. I memorized protocols with ease, and I learned to apply them even when chaos surrounded me. My shooting scores qualified me as an expert marksman, and my physical fitness results consistently ranked among the best in my unit. For the first time, I wasn't someone's sister or daughter. I was Ava Brooks, and I had earned my place. When I completed my training, I was assigned to the 10th Mountain Division. Deployment orders came soon after, Afghanistan. I called home to let them know. I don't know why I still hoped they'd care. Some part of me was still that kid wanting her parents' approval. "Afghanistan," my mother repeated flat. "Well, I suppose that was inevitable." "Just keep your head down," my father said. "Don't try to be a hero." That was it. "No, be safe. No, we're proud of you." They didn't send care packages. They didn't ask for my address. While other soldiers unwrapped letters from home filled with encouragement, I received silence. But overseas, I found something I never had growing up, a family. My squad became my support system, my lifeline. We stood watch together in the dead of night, made each other laugh through sandstorms and rations, and celebrated birthdays with duct tape banners and MRE brownies. Sergeant Jenna Cole, our squad leader, was exactly the mentor I had always needed, tough, relentless, and fair. She demanded excellence, but gave credit where it was due. And when she looked at me, I didn't feel invisible. 3 months into deployment, our convoy was ambushed by an IED. The explosion ripped through the lead vehicle. Without hesitation, I sprinted toward the flames, my medical bag strapped to my chest. Bullets cracked around me as I reached Staff Sergeant Eli Ward, whose femoral artery had been severed. Blood poured into the dirt. "Stay with me, Eli," I said, voice steady though my hands moved with urgency. I applied a combat tourniquet and started fluids, all while enemy fire zipped past my helmet. A medevac chopper took 14 minutes to arrive, 14 minutes during which I refused to let him die. Captain Owen Cross saw everything. "You've got ice in your veins," he said afterward. "Ward would be gone if not for you." Word spread quickly. I was awarded an Army Commendation Medal with a V, device for valor. I called home, heart pounding, hoping this finally might mean something to them. "That's nice, dear," my mother said. "Did you hear Zane made junior partner at his firm?" It was like I hadn't spoken. Over the months that followed, I became known as someone who could be relied on in a crisis. I treated everything from battlefield trauma to respiratory infections. The infantry guys, who usually didn't respect support personnel, started coming to me voluntarily. I was promoted to sergeant ahead of schedule. In my performance review, my commanding officer wrote, "Sergeant Brooks demonstrates exemplary medical skill under pressure and exhibits leadership beyond her years." During my 18-month deployment, I saved 11 lives in active combat. That number mattered more to me than any test score ever had. Every soldier I stabilized and kept breathing until evacuation felt like a quiet answer to my family's doubt. When Zane graduated from law school, my parents hosted an extravagant party. I was flown home on leave, not because they missed me, but to maintain appearances. I stood in the corner in my dress uniform, watching champagne glasses clink in celebration of someone else's life. When one uncle asked about my service, my father cut in quickly. "Ava's doing fine with her military work. But today's about Zane's achievement. Third in his class, you know?" Later that night, my mother glanced at my uniform. "What are all those little ribbons for?" "This one's for combat medical service," I said, trying to be patient. "This is the Commendation Medal. I received it for saving." "How fascinating," she interrupted. "Cousin Ivy just finished her residency at Johns Hopkins. Now that's a medical career." I said nothing. I just smiled the way soldiers do when they're bleeding on the inside but can't afford to show it. The next morning, I boarded the flight back to Afghanistan with my pride still intact, but my heart a little heavier. The emotional gap between me and my family wasn't just wide, it felt unbridgeable. My second deployment came quickly, this time to an even more dangerous region. Intelligence reports warned of heavy enemy activity. The briefings were sobering. The night before we shipped out, I made one last call home. "We're heading into a rough area," I said carefully. "I just wanted to talk before we go." "Try not to play hero," my father replied. "Real heroes come back and do something meaningful with their lives." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I should go. Early start tomorrow." "Email when you can," my mother said briskly. "Oh, and Zane's engagement party is next month. We'll send you pictures." I hung up, knowing deep in my bones that whatever happened next, I was on my own. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. "Open this only if you don't make it back. You chose this path for a reason, Ava," I wrote. "Whatever happens, remember this. Your worth is not defined by their understanding. You already know who you are." 6 months into my second deployment, I received unexpected orders. I was being transferred to a Special Operations Medical Support Team. My commanding officer had quietly nominated me based on my performance under pressure. The selection process was intense. Physicals that pushed me to the edge, medical drills timed to the second, psychological evaluations that probed deep into my mental resilience. "This isn't standard combat medicine," Lieutenant Colonel Lydia Grant told me during my briefing. "You'll operate in high-risk environments with minimal support. Small teams. No backup. No room for error. If something goes wrong, it's on you." The training was like nothing I had experienced before. We practiced advanced medical techniques while sleep-deprived, performed simulated surgeries in moving vehicles, and learned to think in complete darkness. The elite operators I trained with didn't care about gender, background, or rank. They cared about one thing: whether you could get the job done. And I could. I was judged solely by my skill, and for the first time in my life, that was enough. On April 15th, we were activated for a mission that had the potential to change everything. 3 American aid workers had been taken hostage by insurgents in a remote mountain region. Intelligence showed they would likely be moved or executed, Within 48 hours, our 12-person team was tasked with extraction. I was the only medic. The plan was clear: insertion by helicopter at night, raid the compound, stabilize the hostages, and exfil. I was to remain with the bird until the target was secured, then move in to treat injuries. Expect dehydration, malnutrition, possible physical trauma, I told the team during our medical briefing. Our goal is to keep them alive long enough to get out. We launched just after midnight. 2 Blackhawks cut through the dark, silent sky. No one spoke. Each of us had our role. I triple-checked my med bags, knowing I wouldn't get a second chance. 20 minutes from the objective, alarms blared. The lead helicopter had taken ground fire. I felt the aircraft jolt violently. The pilot, Major Tara Quinn, fought to stabilize the descent, but hydraulic failure sent us crashing into a narrow valley. The impact threw me against the cabin wall. For a moment, everything blurred. Smoke filled the cabin. Cries of pain echoed around me. My ears rang, but I moved. My body knew what to do. I scrambled to the cockpit. Major Quinn was slumped over, blood gushing from a head wound. The co-pilot, Lieutenant Mark Hale, had a compound fracture in his left arm. I stabilized Quinn's neck, wrapped her head, administered morphine to Hale, and splinted his arm, all while gunfire erupted outside. Captain Owen Cross shouted over the noise, "Hostiles are converging on our position." I dragged the pilots to cover behind nearby rocks. The second helicopter couldn't land, it was too hot. "We're on our own," Cross called out. 12 of us, 2 already down, against an estimated 30 hostile fighters. I had no time to think. Specialist Luca Dean was hit in the thigh, screaming in pain. I crawled under fire, bullets kicking up dirt inches from my body. "Hands here," I shouted, guiding his pressure hold while I applied a tourniquet and started fluids. For 4 hours, we held our ground. I moved between the wounded, changing dressings, monitoring vitals, and maintaining airways. When Master Sergeant Clay Burns took a round to the chest, I performed a needle decompression with a penlight clamped between my teeth to see. "Mitchell," Cross barked. "We need airstrike coordinates now." I was the only one with a clear line of sight. I crawled to the edge of the rocks, exposed myself to fire, and relayed the enemy's position. A bullet grazed my helmet as I spoke into the radio. Minutes later, thunder roared from above as fighter jets decimated half their positions. But we weren't done. As dawn broke, our situation worsened. Quinn was fading fast and we had 3 more wounded. Then an explosion rocked the ground. An enemy grenade landed close. Shrapnel tore through my left leg, but I stayed conscious. I had to. Sergeant Noah Blake was critically wounded in the same blast. I dragged him 20 yards to safety, ignoring the burning pain in my leg. I applied a chest seal to his sucking wound, started IVs, and shielded him with my body from incoming fire. "Stay with me, Noah," I whispered. "Your kids need you." By noon, Captain Cross made the call to split the team. "Brooks, take the worst of the wounded. Head east toward the ridge. Second Bird will extract you there. We'll draw attention the other way." I didn't argue. I organized the evacuation, turning stretchers from tarp and branches. We moved slowly, every step excruciating. I checked pulses, adjusted fluids, reassured the semi-conscious. My own leg throbbed, hot and wet with blood, but I pushed forward. After 48 hours of hiking through enemy terrain with limited supplies, we reached the extraction point. When the helicopter appeared on the horizon, I nearly collapsed from relief. Back at base, the medics finally looked at my own wound. The shrapnel had missed major vessels, but sliced deep into muscle. Painful, but not fatal. The mission had technically failed. The hostages remained captive. But what I didn't know then was that the intelligence I had gathered, coordinates, head counts, enemy placements, would be used days later in a follow-up operation. That mission not only rescued the original 3 hostages, but 24 more civilians, and exposed a terror plot targeting American soil. Because of the mission's classified nature, my part in it was never made public. I received a Purple Heart for my injury and a confidential commendation, tucked silently into my record. When I called home from the hospital, my family's reaction was as cold as ever. "So, will this affect your military contract?" my father asked. "Maybe it's time to reconsider your direction." "It's just a leg wound," I replied, too exhausted to argue. "I'll be back with my team soon." The physical wounds healed. The scar down my thigh faded to a dull pink. But the nightmares, the memories of watching Sergeant Blake fade out despite everything I'd done, those stayed longer. Still, through it all, I held tight to one truth. I had never been more certain of my purpose. I didn't need a podium. I didn't need applause. I had saved 15 lives in those hours. That was enough. Or so I thought. 3 months after my injury, once I had completed rehab and regained full mobility, I was granted 30 days of medical leave. Physically, I was cleared, but no one could repair what was happening inside. I startled at the smallest sounds, jolted awake from dreams soaked in blood and sand, and sometimes found myself bracing for danger in places where none existed. The mission I'd just survived was still classified. I couldn't talk about it with anyone, not even the therapist they assigned me. "I can't discuss the details," I repeated, session after session. "I just need to learn how to live with what happened." Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped my family might finally see me, that they might realize I wasn't playing soldier. I was risking my life, saving others, doing what most people would never dare. I had received a Purple Heart. I had been personally commended by a general. Maybe, just maybe, they would finally acknowledge me. I flew back to Salem, unsure of what to expect. Their house was unchanged. The lawn, perfect as always. The windows, spotless. The display cabinet in the living room still showcased Zane's awards, diplomas, and law school graduation photo. My picture, if it was still there at all, was one from my high school swim team. Zane was visiting with his fiancée, Tessa Riley, a tax attorney who looked every bit the part of a future Brooks daughter-in-law. My mother had organized a dinner to celebrate their engagement, apparently forgetting that I was arriving the same day. "Oh, Ava," she said, surprised when I walked through the door in uniform. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow." "No," I said evenly. "You told me to come today." "Well," she replied quickly, brushing it off, "I'm sure you won't mind meeting Tessa. It's a special night." Dinner was agonizing. The conversation revolved entirely around Zane, his clients, his wedding venue, the custom tailoring of his suit. Tessa tried to include me, asking polite questions about my service, but my father quickly intercepted. "Ava's just doing a stint in the military," he said. "Nothing as exciting as your work, of course." When Tessa noticed the Purple Heart on my chest and asked what it was for, my mother actually rolled her eyes. "She got injured during a training exercise, I think," she said dismissively. "The military hands out medals for everything now." "It wasn't a training exercise," I said tightly. "And the Purple Heart is for wounds sustained in combat. I was hit by enemy fire while treating casualties in an active combat zone." Zane snorted. "Come on, Ava. You're a glorified nurse. You probably tripped over a tent stake or something." Something in me snapped. "I was wounded while saving lives under fire," I said, voice low and shaking with fury. "I treated 4 critically injured soldiers. One of them died in my arms. I ran through bullets and explosions with blood pouring from my own leg, trying to keep my team alive." Silence fell. My father cleared his throat. "If you'd gone to medical school like we wanted," he said, "you could be saving lives in a real hospital instead of playing war hero." That word, playing, hung in the air like poison. "What your father means," my mother began, "is that there are more respectable ways to practice medicine. Look at your cousin Ivy. She's a brilliant doctor now." "I know," I replied coldly. "You've mentioned her 47 times. Zane smirked. "Let's be honest, Ava. You joined the army because you couldn't cut it in school. You've always been the family disappointment." I stood, my palms pressed against the table to steady my shaking hands. "In the last 5 years," I said, "I've saved more lives than you'll ever understand. I've performed emergency trauma procedures under enemy fire that your fancy hospital friends wouldn't even attempt. I've held dying soldiers and written letters to their parents explaining how brave they were in their final moments. And not once, have any of you asked what I actually do. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. We just worry you're wasting your potential, she finally said. Do you even tell people what you do? Do you? I asked sharply. Do you tell your colleagues that your daughter serves in the army? Or do you leave me out because I'm a blemish on your academic pedigree? My father's eyes flickered. He didn't answer. The military is a perfectly respectable temporary career, he said instead. We just always expected more. Expected more? I laughed, bitter and hollow. I've been blown up, shot at, and operated on soldiers with nothing but gauze and grit. I've spent nights in dirt pits, risking my life for people I barely knew, because that's what service is. And you still think I'm less because I didn't become a lab rat in a white coat. Zane leaned back smugly. You're overreacting. No, I said firmly. I'm finally reacting. I walked out without another word, got into my rental car parked beside their luxury sedans, and sat behind the wheel shaking. The tears came all at once. Years of rejection, of disrespect, of quiet hurt, finally spilling out. My phone buzzed. It was Sergeant Maya Lane. Hey, Brooks. Just checking in. How's the leg? How's the family? I couldn't speak. Just sobbed quietly into the phone. I'm on my way, she said. Text me the address. Don't go anywhere. 2 hours later, she arrived at my hotel. She brought snacks, blankets, and silence, the kind you share only with someone who understands. That night, I talked for hours. About the mission. The chaos. The fear. The pain. The people I lost. And the family that never once cared to know. She listened. And when I finally fell asleep, exhausted, empty, and numb, I knew something had shifted. I didn't need them to see me. I just needed to stop expecting them to. After my leave ended, I returned to base and requested a reassignment. I needed distance. Not just from the battlefield, but from the wound my family had left open. The rejection I'd experienced during that dinner cut deeper than any shrapnel ever could. My request was approved faster than expected. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center needed seasoned combat medics for their Wounded Warrior program. It was a perfect fit. I would be helping injured service members recover, physically and emotionally, using everything I'd learned in the field. It also meant I'd be stationed within driving distance of Washington, D.C., far from Salem. Close enough for emergencies, but not for surprise visits. At Walter Reed, I found a new purpose. The soldiers I worked with understood me without explanation. Many had served in the same kinds of operations I had. We didn't need to describe our nightmares or flinches. Our eyes said enough. Captain Leo West, who had lost both legs to an IED, became one of my regular patients. He was quiet, proud, and determined. During one grueling therapy session, he looked at me and said, "You have a gift, Sergeant Brooks. You don't just understand the physical side of this. You understand what's going on up here too," he added, tapping his head. That's rare. I poured myself into my work. I helped design new pain management protocols tailored to soldiers who struggled with both physical injuries and PTSD. I started peer support circles for medics suffering from combat trauma. Slowly, things began to change. Colonel Dana Shaw, my commanding officer, called me into her office one afternoon after reviewing program data. "Sergeant Brooks," she said, "your methods are increasing recovery rates by 15%. You're not just helping these warriors, you're changing how we care for them." It felt right. Not flashy. Not public. Just deeply meaningful. What I didn't know was that my teammates from the Special Operations Mission had been speaking for me behind closed doors. Captain Owen Cross, now promoted to major, had submitted a full report to higher command about my performance during that harrowing operation. How I'd stayed behind under fire, treated wounded, crawled into danger, held the line when everything else collapsed. That intelligence I'd helped gather? It had led to a follow-up operation that not only rescued the 3 original hostages, but 24 additional captives. It had also disrupted a terror network planning attacks on American soil. One quiet Tuesday, my phone rang with a blocked number. I almost ignored it. until the voice on the other end said, "Sergeant Brooks, please report to the office of the Secretary of the Army at 0900 tomorrow. Dress uniform required." My heart dropped. Summons like that weren't casual. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd done on that mission. Was I being investigated? Had I made a mistake I didn't even know about? When I arrived at the Pentagon the next morning, I was ushered into a private office where two people waited: Major Lydia Grant from Army Command and a sharply dressed civilian who introduced himself as Mr. Sean Bell from the White House Military Office. "Sergeant Brooks," Major Grant began, "your actions during Operation Silent Retrieval have been reviewed at the highest levels." I blinked. "The operation is classified. Portions have been declassified for the purposes of formal recognition," Mr. Bell said. "Recognition?" Major Grant slid a folder across the desk. "You are being awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism. The President will present it to you in person at the White House next week." I stared at the citation. My name, my actions, my story, right there in black ink. "This can't be real," I whispered. "I was just doing my job." "No, Sergeant," Grant said firmly. "You went above and beyond, under fire, while wounded. Because of you, lives were saved. Threats were neutralized. What you did matters." Mr. Bell leaned forward. "The President feels your courage should be acknowledged publicly. He's made personal arrangements for the ceremony." As I left the Pentagon that day, my heart was thundering, not from fear, but from something else. I'd never sought medals or media. But this wasn't about recognition for me. It was about truth. My story, finally told. Later that night, I sat in my apartment and stared at a blank text box on my phone. Should I invite them? Despite everything, a small ember still burned inside me. So I typed the message. "I'm receiving the Distinguished Service Cross from the President next Thursday at 2 p.m. at the White House. You're welcome to attend if you'd like." My mother's reply came hours later. "We'll check our schedules. Your father may have a faculty meeting that conflicts." A faculty meeting. I laughed out loud. Sharp, bitter, incredulous laughter. Still, 3 days before the ceremony, they confirmed they'd be there, along with Zane. Their tone made it sound like they were doing me a favor. I wasn't expecting miracles. But this time, I wouldn't be arriving looking for their approval. The day of the ceremony arrived with perfect spring weather in Washington, D.C. The White House East Room had been arranged for the formal presentation, rows of chairs filled with officials, dignitaries, and a few select guests. A modest stage stood at the front, where the president would award the nation's highest honors. There were 4 recipients, including me. The others were men, 2 Marines and an Air Force pilot, all visibly older and more battle-worn. We exchanged quiet nods as we waited in the antechamber. My dress uniform was pressed to perfection, every ribbon aligned, my boots polished until they gleamed. I stood tall, unmoving, as ceremony staff passed us by. Through a nearby doorway, I saw them enter, my family. My mother's posture was stiff. My father looked impatient, checking his watch. Zane wore a forced smile, guiding Tessa toward the seating area. They took their seats near the back, deliberately distant, unsure of how to fit into a room like this. And for once, I didn't care. The ceremony began with military precision. Aide-de-camp announced each honoree. One by one, our actions were read aloud, formal, careful language describing moments filled with chaos, pain, and impossible choices. Then it was my turn. I stood at attention as the military aide read my citation. Sergeant Ava Brooks distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous conduct in the face of the enemy while serving as a combat medic with Special Operations Task Force Dagger. When her helicopter was shot down in hostile territory, Sergeant Brooks, despite being wounded by shrapnel, provided life-saving care to multiple casualties while under direct enemy fire. As he continued, I watched my parents' expressions change. First, polite attention, then confusion, then something close to disbelief. They had never heard these details. They had never wanted to. Sergeant Brooks's actions directly saved the lives of 15 U.S. service members. Additionally, Intelligence she provided under fire was instrumental in a subsequent operation that rescued 27 hostages and disrupted planned terrorist attacks on U.S. soil. The president stood. Protocol dictated he remain seated during citation readings, but he broke form. He looked directly at me as he walked to the podium. "The citation doesn't tell the full story," he said. "Sergeant Brooks didn't just save her team. She made possible the rescue of innocent civilians. She helped prevent terrorist attacks. She held the line when everything else was falling apart. Today, we honor her courage and her commitment to her fellow soldiers." He stepped forward and placed the Distinguished Service Cross around my neck. Its weight was sharp and solid against my chest. "Sergeant Ava Brooks," he said, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "My brother was one of those hostages. My family owes you a debt we'll never be able to repay." I blinked back tears and nodded. "Thank you, sir." The room erupted into applause. My fellow recipients turned to me, some offering salutes. The press cameras flashed from every angle. I scanned the room and saw my family, frozen in their seats. Stunned. Silent. During the reception that followed, military officials, medical leaders, and government representatives approached me one after another. They spoke not with politeness, but with genuine admiration. "You exemplify the best of our combat medical corps," the Army Surgeon General told me. "I've read the reports. Your work saved lives." A group of civilians approached me next, introduced by a woman from the State Department. "These are the aid workers rescued in the second operation," she explained. "They wanted to meet you." A woman with kind eyes stepped forward. "They told us what you did," she whispered as she hugged me. "Because of you, I made it home to my 5-year-old daughter. Because of you, I got to see her grow up." I could barely speak. As more people gathered to shake my hand and thank me, I caught a glimpse of my family standing awkwardly near a wall. My father wasn't speaking. My mother looked completely disoriented. Zane looked like he didn't know whether to approach me or not. Eventually, they walked over. My father cleared his throat. "That was quite a ceremony." "Thank you for coming," I replied, my tone polite but distant. "We had no idea," my mother said softly, "about any of it." "You never asked," I said simply. Zane looked between us. "All those things they said you did, that was real?" Before I could answer, Major Cross appeared at my side. He didn't wait to be introduced. "Brooks is the best combat medic I've ever worked with," he said, looking straight at my father. "When we were pinned down and taking fire from 3 directions, she crawled through open ground with shrapnel in her leg to treat a wounded soldier. Then she dragged him 20 yards to cover. She didn't stop until we were all safe." My family stood silent. Their expressions, usually so controlled, were completely undone. "I need to check on one of my patients," I said, gently stepping away. "Captain West is here from Walter Reed." "Of course," my father murmured. As I turned to go, General Lydia Grant intercepted me. She placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "I want to introduce you to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs," she said. "He's heard about your work at Walter Reed. Very impressive stuff." From the corner of my eye, I saw my family watching this interaction between me and one of the most powerful leaders in the U.S. military. I saw it click in their eyes for the first time. This wasn't some phase or rebellion. This was real. And I wasn't just good at what I did, I was respected for it. The reception continued for another hour. Officers, soldiers, and policymakers approached me with genuine interest. Several military doctors asked to review my therapy protocols. A Navy admiral invited me to speak at a Joint Services medical symposium. My family watched all of it, no longer the authors of my story, just spectators. As the reception wound down, I found a rare moment alone. That's when Zane approached me again, his usual self-assured confidence noticeably absent. "Ava," he began, "I owe you an apology." I didn't say anything, just waited. "I've been arrogant, dismissive. Honestly, I had no idea of what you've really been doing these past few years." "No," I replied calmly. "You didn't. You never asked." He nodded, swallowing the weight of that truth. "Can we start over? I'd like to actually know my sister." Before I could respond, Our mother joined us. Her eyes were glassy. When they described the helicopter crash, how you were wounded, how you still kept going, she paused, her voice cracking. I couldn't breathe. I just kept thinking, we could have lost you. I tried to tell you I'd been injured. I said gently. You told Tessa I probably tripped over a tent stake. She flinched. We've been terrible, haven't we? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Then came my father. His expression was unreadable until he finally spoke. I saw how those generals, those commanders looked at you today. With respect. Not formality, real respect. I've been in academia for 40 years, Ava. I've never been spoken to like that, even at international conferences. But they listen to you like, he stopped, struggling to finish. Like you're someone that matters. I didn't gloat. I didn't break. I just said, I should go join the other honorees for photos. As I turned, Sergeant Maya Lane appeared beside me, having watched the whole exchange. Your family looks like they got hit by a freight train, she whispered. They're seeing me clearly for the first time, I replied. Want to ditch this place after the photos, she grinned. The team's gathering at O'Malley's. We're celebrating properly. I smiled, genuinely this time. My real family? Absolutely. We posed for the official photographs. One by one, the president shook our hands again. When he got to me, he leaned in quietly. Those people who looked out of place in the back, he asked, they're your family? Yes, Mr. President. He nodded. They're seeing you today. Truly seeing you. Sometimes, people need someone else to point out the extraordinary person standing right in front of them. Later that night, I changed into jeans and a hoodie, ditched the medals, and met my team at a quiet local bar. There were no photographers, no speeches, just laughter, beer, and shared memories. No one asked me to explain what I'd done. They already knew. They had done it too. My phone buzzed again and again with texts from my family, but I ignored them. Not out of cruelty, just exhaustion. There would be time for all that later. Tonight belonged to the people who had always seen my worth, long before any medals or presidential ceremonies. The next morning, I opened the news app on my phone. A photo from the ceremony topped the page. Me standing at attention as the president placed the Distinguished Service Cross around my neck. My parents sat in the background, their faces caught in expressions of disbelief. The caption read, Family of DSC recipient Sergeant Ava Brooks witnesses recognition of her heroism. It was perfect, because for years, they'd tried to write my story for me. And now, they were just watching it unfold. 6 months after the White House ceremony, I fully transitioned into my new role as an instructor at the Army Medical Department Center. The position felt like a natural next step, using my experiences, both on the battlefield and at Walter Reed, to shape the next generation of combat medics. The Distinguished Service Cross changed many things professionally. Promotions came faster. I was invited to speak at conferences I never dreamed of attending. Commanders sought out my input. But the most meaningful change wasn't in rank or recognition. It was personal. 3 weeks after the ceremony, my father showed up unannounced at my apartment in San Antonio. He wore khakis and a plain polo shirt, casual, which was rare for him. He looked uncomfortable, but determined. I was wondering, he said, if you'd show me around the base. I'd like to understand what you do if you're willing. That day marked something I'd never expected. A beginning. I walked him through my classroom, showed him where we ran trauma simulations, explained how we trained medics to make life-or-death decisions in under 60 seconds. He listened. Not just heard, listened. He asked thoughtful questions. When one of my senior officers greeted me with a sharp salute and a genuine, "Good to see you, Sergeant Brooks," I saw something flash in my father's eyes. Pride. Over dinner that evening, he admitted quietly, I was wrong. I measured success through such a narrow lens, I couldn't see the value in what you were doing. I see it now. My mother followed suit in her own way. She began calling more regularly. She sent care packages to my base, something she had never done during my deployments. Inside one box, I found something that stopped me cold, my grandfather's old military photo and his original medic badge, the one I had adored as a child. Her note was brief. Your grandfather would have been proud. I should have made that connection a long time ago. Zane surprised me most of all. He started volunteering with a Veterans Legal Aid program, helping former soldiers navigate disability claims and VA benefits. On one of our now regular phone calls, he said, "I wanted to understand your world better. Working with these vets, it's opened my eyes." 3 months after the ceremony, I agreed to attend a family therapy session. We sat in a sterile office with a calm, direct therapist named Dr. Eric Moss. For the first time, my parents spoke about the fear behind their rejection. "I was terrified from the moment you enlisted," my mother confessed, her voice trembling. "Every time I saw news of casualties, I imagined it was you. It was easier to pretend your job wasn't dangerous than to live in that fear." My father, always more guarded, finally shared something too. When my own father came back from World War II, he said, he was different. He never spoke about what he saw, but I saw it in his eyes. "I promised myself I'd never let my children carry that kind of pain. When you chose the same path, I felt like I'd failed to protect you." "You couldn't protect me," I said gently, "but you could have supported me." Those conversations didn't fix everything, but they began the slow work of rebuilding. We wouldn't be the kind of family that shared inside jokes and cozy holidays, but we were learning how to respect each other, finally. That Thanksgiving, I returned to Salem for the first time in years. Something felt different from the moment I walked in. For one, my mother had placed my military medals in the family display case, next to Zane's law degree, and not hidden behind it. During dinner, my father invited some of his colleagues and a few veterans from the local VA hospital. The table was a strange mix of academics and soldiers, but for once, it didn't feel like I was living in two separate worlds. I belonged to both. After dinner, my mother took me aside and showed me something she had made in secret, a shadow box. Inside were clippings from newspapers about the ceremony, a photo of me receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, and a small map with pins marking every location I had served in. "I should have celebrated your service all along," she said softly. "I'm trying to make up for lost time." And I believed her. Weeks later, while helping my father find an old textbook in his study, I discovered a worn-out recruitment brochure from the 1970s, folded neatly and hidden in a desk drawer. It was for the Army Medical Corps. Notes in his handwriting filled the margins. "You thought about enlisting?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. I'd signed the paperwork, passed the physical, was ready to go. "What happened?" "Your grandfather talked me out of it. Said too many Mitchell men had already gone to war. He wanted different for me. I think I was hard on you because you had the courage to do what I didn't." We sat quietly after that, the silence no longer uncomfortable. Back on base, I continued training young medics. One day, after a particularly grueling class, a young recruit approached me. "Sergeant Brooks," she said, her voice nervous but steady. "I joined because of you. After I saw the news stories, I want to make that kind of difference." I smiled. "The medals don't make the medic," I told her. "It's what you do when no one's watching. When it's just you, a wounded soldier, and time running out. That's what matters." She nodded, wide-eyed. And in her, I saw a reflection of myself from years ago, determined, uncertain, brave. Recognition hadn't made me valuable. It had simply made people see what had been there all along. The truth was, I had saved myself long before anyone ever said I saved others. And that truth? That was finally enough. Have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to believe in you most? If this story moved you, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story. And if you want to hear more powerful true life journeys like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by other people's expectations. Thank you for listening to my story.